Hello, this is Mitt Romney.
To help with connectivity.
Mike Sermich, Sermich.com.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, April 11th, 2018. My name is Michael Brooks, and on Michael Wednesday, this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's show, Alex Hochuli, a Sao Paulo-based writer, researcher, host of the Alpha Bunga Bunga Global Politics podcast, co-host of that podcast. We're talking about the soft coup in Brazil, the imprisonment of Lula, and an encroaching neo-fascism that goes back several years in Brazil. Mark Zuckerberg was an android in front of the Senate. Senators asked him some seemingly tough questions and promised no regulatory or policy follow-through. What a shock. Trump is promising action in Syria. Russia has vetoed a UN motion to investigate the chemical weapons attacks. And of course, one can only be thankful that Hillary Clinton is not president, taking us into World War III. Trump promises the missiles will be coming. Apparently, they have not come yet. Border agents, new videos emerge of U.S. border agents trying to dump an injured man over the Mexican border as part of the ongoing pileup of atrocities in the implementation of Trump's and the Republicans' anti-immigration agenda. Oklahoma teachers have continued their walkout, and large crowds are coming to show solidarity and support. And good things can also go viral. Teachers in Arizona have threatened to go on strike due to low pay and in response to corporate tax breaks that, of course, has been synchronized with their low pay. One of the worst human beings, not only in America, but on planet Earth, is not seeking re-election. We bid adieu to Paul Ryan, who, after dedicating his political life to causing human misery and increasing suffering of every shape and variety, domestic and international, has announced that his work is done after a generation-busting tax redistribution to the wealthy scheme. He can rest assured that more people will go hungry, more children will not have heat, and fewer Americans will have health care. Mission accomplished. Now he can go make some real money and seriously benefit from some of the oligarch policies. That's correct. I think that crowd, though, was saying Paul Ryan sucks because Paul Ryan isn't, overtly racist. But yes, Paul Ryan does suck. Truly just utterly loathsome and contemptible figure, and another person that, we'll see plenty of, never Trumper types and people who don't like having a grotesque president with a personality disorder, but want to separate him from the Republican Party, or, going to gaze longingly and talk about how, Paul Ryan, agree or disagree, was civil, and all sorts of horrible, grotesque ways of remembering
He's
this.
a wonk.
Oh, yeah, he's a real wonk. This guy whose, entire being in public office was to gut and destroy the already meager American social safety net and was, put increasing human suffering at the front and center of all of his policymaking. And I don't care what his, intentions were. Utterly irrelevant. That's what he did. That's what his policy agenda was. Now, what, do you want to play this instead? Okay, this is Paul Ryan. I don't, is this on the list? This is Paul Ryan this morning announcing his resignation, that he won't be seeking re-election. I cannot stress enough how important it is to, you can set my polemics aside, but any political write-up for this guy has to say that he came in, voted for the invasion of Iraq, supported the entire Bush agenda, and made his name as somebody who wrote a absolutely savage budget and attack on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And of course was a bagman for every corporate interest imaginable from a policy perspective. This is Paul Ryan.
Worry about the impact of your announcement on the 2018 midterms and perhaps sending a signal that the House is lost for?
Yeah, I gave it some consideration, but I really do not believe whether I stay or go in 2019 is going to affect a person's individual race for Congress. I really don't think a person's race for Congress is going to hinge on whether Paul Ryan's speaker or not. So I really don't think it affects it. Look, if we do our jobs, which we are, we're going to be fine as a majority. I'm grateful for the president to give us this chance to actually get this stuff done. I'm grateful that we have unified government that the president, with his victory, gave us so that we get all these big things done. We're going to have a great record to run on. We have a great economy, great accomplishments, more to do. And I really don't think that the American people are going to want to have the gridlock that the Democrats are promising. So I'm confident we can run through the tape and we can get this done.
I mean, the only important note besides all the pablum there is the fact that, again, in the never Trumper universe, this guy's going to be held in contrast to Trump as, somebody who was polite and didn't overtly promote bigotry. He was with Trump every step of the way. And as you can see there, I mean, that is, again, the constant refrain and clarity that people need to get. I mean, Trump is a Republican. He is the perfect Republican president. He's implementing the exact agenda that these people want. And if they need to overlook some stuff that they might find, uncouth or distasteful, they're perfectly happy to do it in the service of legislating American oligarchy. Obviously, more broadly, there's a American conversation beyond Republicans about what Trump represents with regards to things like foreign and policy, particularly, I would argue. But, Paul Ryan, that's his legacy. He was an enabler of Trump, a savage, Dickensian social Darwinist legislator. And I'm sure, he's still young. He'll go on to do many more harmful things.
I was hoping to see him lose to Bryce.
I was hoping so too. Check out Randy Bryce. Look, guys, we are actually starting to get, as we move into the summer, and I think it's very important to keep a broader perspective than just the electoral cycle and the deeper dynamics. But we are going to, get fairly soon to we got to flip Congress. That needs to happen. It's very, very important to get Democrats in control of the House. That's a for real and urgent task. All right, we got a few ads that we're going to jump to that I like because I feel so strong about my ads because I love the products, do you see? That Sam has recorded. So please check them out. Great deals for you. And then we'll come back to me for a second, and then we will go to Alex Hochuli, talk about Brazil.
Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about brooklinen.com before. My favorite sheets I've owned since those cotton, I had sheep sheets when I was in college, 30 years ago. And I remember, they were always, they were cool. They get softer, but they were always cool because of the type of cotton. And that is what I love about my Brooklinen sheets. Look, spend a third of your life in your sheets. They make a huge difference on how you sleep. Brooklinen.com are the best, most comfortable sheets I have ever owned. They are also, and as you know, I don't like to spend a lot of money, there's no big markup. Upgrade your nightly routine, help you feel more well-rested every day. Brooklinen was founded in April of 2014 by a husband and wife team, Vicky and Rich Fulop. Their philosophy was pretty simple. The most beautiful, comfortable home essentials, no crazy prices. Most bedding is marked up as much as 300%. Did you know that? My sister used to work in like a home, what do you call those? Home accessory?
Furnishings?
Yeah, sort of furnishings. Markups are insane. Brooklinen, no such markup. They've cut out the middleman or middlewoman. It's the fastest growing bedding brand in the world. Over 15,000 five-star reviews. They were named best online bedding category by Good Housekeeping. They have all sorts of versatile colors and patterns. You can mix and match, complement any decor. My Brooklinen sheets are the best. They're the most comfortable sheets I've ever slept on. Brooklinen.com has an exclusive offer for Majority Report listeners. Get $20 off and free shipping when you use the promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com. They're so confident with their sheets, they're going to offer you a risk-free 60-night satisfaction guarantee and a lifetime warranty on all their sheets and comforters. Only way to get $20 off and free shipping, use the promo code MAJORITY at brooklinen.com. That's Brooklinen, BROOKLINEN.com, promo code MAJORITY. Brooklinen, these are the best sheets ever. Now back to Michael with the rest of today's show.
So, did you know, Matt, that you were in sheets so much? Did you know that? Matt, he's not listening. I love those where he's just like, did you know that the average mammal spends a fourth of their time next to a comforter? Matt?
Yeah. Well, I didn't particularly study that, but yes. I love Matt's I'm not listening recoveries. Well, wasn't particularly engaged in that course of, but yeah, it makes sense. That's beautiful. All right, we're going to take a brief break. We'll be right back with Alex Hochuli.
Pressures of life and it up, yeah. Now stay down, mama, time, pick it up. Now bother with it down, full style, strictly up, full vibe. Pick it up when the bills, them, the rent and the mortgage due, yeah. When me try this, when your best friends are gone and it's only you. Light up a split, turn up the music, skanking sweet. Everybody wanna feel like free. Forget your troubles and rock with me. Feel a reggae music, sweet, yeah. Skanking sweet. Everybody wanna feel like free. Forget your troubles and rock with me. You know, feel a reggae music, sweet, yeah. Skanking sweet. For every pain there's a melody. For every trouble there's a harmony that brings everything together. So make us sing together. And who say life no order? And every man got this struggle. I beg you to help me, Lord, and let me overcome my troubles. Who's skanking? Everybody wanna feel. Forget your troubles and rock with me. You know, feel a reggae music sweet.
Welcome back to the Majority Report. I'm Michael Brooks. Joining us now is Alex Hochuli. He's a writer and researcher based in Sao Paulo, Brazil. He's also the producer and co-host of the Alpha Bunga Bunga Global Politics podcast. Alex, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. We need to sort of untangle what's happening in Brazil. It's really a story that's much more understood in the context of a soft coup, and also in a global pattern of a resurgent extremist far right, and essentially a new stance of capital to not even negotiate for a sort of win-win social democracy. But we need to, in order to unpack that, we need to go through the specifics of the corruption charges and this broader kind of sprawling investigation of Brazil. But first, let's really work backwards. We're going to get an understanding of what the Workers' Party is and who Lula is as a political figure. Let's go back to 2002 when Lula da Silva was elected president. This was, I believe, his third or fourth try in running for president. And it was branded globally that Lula had become... he had moderated. He had sort of, from being a firebrand labor leader to a, the buzzwords of the sort of global technocracy, a pragmatist, and so on and so forth. He actually really was, in a way that I think is extremely defensible, which we'll get to. But that meant something actually in a Brazilian context, which will set the stage for understanding the types of deals and partnerships that were made that describe the situation today. But maybe you can take us back to 2002, explain that campaign, that positioning of Lula, and how it fit into the broader history of the Workers' Party that he came from.
Right. So when we talk about moderation, I think it's important to understand who Lula was even prior to this. Right. So he emerged as a labor leader in the metal workers in kind of suburban Sao Paulo in the late 70s during the military dictatorship. He is a very charismatic figure. He's a very talented political operator and organizer, and has immense personal credibility. But he was always, despite his militancy, a moderator. His skill was in bringing parties together, getting deals out of the owners of car plants, for example, right? Getting wage deals. Mm-hmm. He, in his speech recently, just before he was taken to prison, recalls this, kind of recalling back memorably that a lot of the workers in the union were pushing for a much higher wage increase, and that eventually he gave in to their demands. So, he was there making reference to the fact that he was a moderator, right? Mm-hmm. So this is his modus operandi, and I think that's important to remember as we go forward. So if we move forward to 2002, that election, he had already, as you said, lost previous elections, often by quite little, since redemocratization in 1989, which was the first kind of fully open democratic elections after the military dictatorship. He wrote a letter, famous letter, called The Letter to the Brazilian People, which is really the letter to Brazilian capital and to international capital, saying we're going to play nice, we're going to be moderate, we're going to be kind of third wayist, we're going to implement some social programs, but we're not going to rock the boat. And some people on the left placed hopes on him that this was just a way of getting elected, not scaring off the Brazilian bourgeoisie too much to get elected, and then he would implement something more radical. That doesn't happen. There's even splits off from his party early on. He brings in a pension reform. So that leads to the creation of the Party of Socialism and Liberty, which still exists and runs kind of to the left of PT, to the Workers' Party. So already in those early stages, you can see that kind of moderation, a break off from the left. And, he gets wrapped up in early on. This is a kind of interesting foreshadowing of the car wash investigations and all the corruption politics and anti-corruption politics that emerge in 2013, 2014. In 2005, there's a big, it's called the Mensalão. It's a big monthly payment scandal where he was basically buying off other congressional parties and to buy their votes, right, to get laws passed. This was a big scandal. It led to more disillusionment with the Workers' Party. And foreshadowed the kind of things that were to come. But what it also does tell us, and I guess we'll come on to this when we talk more broadly about kind of Brazilian corruption, is that this is the way Brazilian politics works in the New Republic, right? You've got a million little parties. I say a million. There's 35 political parties in Brazil. I think 33 effective. I think there's something like 27 in Congress, right? This is world historic levels. I mean, no one else in the world has this many effective parties in Congress. And the vast
I mean, not even like India, just to like really put a point on it. I mean, India like has also this, global, in some ways, deserved reputation that it's, it's also a big, massive, flawed, very heterogeneous, but also democratic culture, in that there's parties that span everywhere from the left and neoliberal to the extreme right, but also parties that represent like, a specific like a Dalit party or a party that represents a specific geography. Like India has that reputation. It's true to an extent. Brazil is like double that. I mean,
and just to correct you, because there's something an important difference. Because while in India you might have regional parties which represent narrow sectionalist interests or a specific strata of society regionally and so on.
Right.
In Brazil, most of these parties do not represent anything. Like you can read the names of the parties, and one's called Progressive, one's called Republican, one's called Social Democratic, one's called Labor.
But it could just be like a couple of people being like, let's form our own little clique.
Yeah, and they depend on their existence by their relationship to the state, not to the relationship to a social base.
Right.
So they're cartel parties. I mean, that's the kind of technical term for these things.
Right.
They're cartel parties. The largest of which is the PMDB, which was the sort of legitimate opposition, the accepted in-house opposition to the military dictatorship. They come out of that, but as time goes on, they become more and more corrupt, and they're they have representatives in every state at all levels of politics, but they're just the largest cartel party, and they ally the PT, the Workers' Party, ally themselves with this PMDB party. They've now called, this is another foreshadowing of what's to come, they've now rebranded to MDB, which is their original name, which is the movement for Brazilian democracy, shedding the party label, right? So that's kind of saying we're not a political party, we're not political. Which kind of tells you a little bit about the kind of anti-political mood in Brazil today.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, because you've got to strike deals with all these parties who don't really mean anything, don't represent anything, it's going to create corruption. I mean, and we've got to say that corruption is a facet of the semi-periphery, of politics of the semi-periphery. It's a factor everywhere, right?
It's a factor everywhere, but I'll draw another, and I know, people this is tricky because I know you have a level of precision which we want, and then I want to get to the successes of Lula on the flip side, but I think it's very, very important to really underline this, because when he came into power, two things happened. I mean, one was that, yes, there's this, it's very important in the global press, in the Western press, it's like, oh, well, when he says moderate, it's the letter to capital that you were talking about, the letter to the Brazilian people. It's that I'm going to pay off World Bank loans. But what it also meant was that we're willing to make compromises. We're going into essentially a structurally corrupt state, and we're willing to make compromises with the existing order in order to gain power. And I think distinctly in Workers' Party case, and this is one of the reasons why I maintain some sympathy, actually also deliver for people. So in other words, they did actually generate real social programs. But the context, so like if we go to South Africa and we say, okay, Jacob Zuma was turning a young democracy that obviously already had serious problems structurally and with corruption and everything else. But he himself was, and the government, the cell he presided over, they're trying to turn it into this pure kleptocracy, which it was not under Mandela and Mbeki, right? Whatever
and
the other.
It wasn't to the same degree under Lula either.
Well, no, I'm actually saying that Lula was inheriting a state almost that Zuma was trying to create. So in other words, he's coming into a state and making deals with a state that already is so structurally corrupted that in order to be quote unquote moderate, you are inevitably going to find yourself in those types of arrangements. And that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, that's right. You're coming into a game and you're having to play by its rules and not your own. And it's worth remembering that PT was always the ethical party. This was the party which was against corruption. So the problem is that when you come in riding a white horse, you're going to fall off. And this is one of these kind of truisms about politics. But, it happened to Tony Blair in Britain, for that matter, as well.
Right.
So, which also explains a little bit the degree of disillusionment that happened with the Workers' Party too. Lula's personal popularity notwithstanding, precisely because they were, supposedly the ethical party, and proved themselves to play by the rules of the pre-existing game, which, creates corruption. There's no kind of two ways about it.
But and I guess the angle I'm pushing though is that maybe it's like there's a distinction between going in to corrupt yourself for the sake of it versus saying, playing with the very dangerous game of let's engage in some of that to actually deliver some real material gain. So maybe we could then talk about the record, the good and the bad of Lula through Dilma. What were the achievements in social policy, and how long did this sort of cold peace with capital last?
Yeah, so I mean, you've got basically what could be called a sort of marriage between a sort of neo-developmentalism, quite soft neo-developmentalism, with a broad kind of macroeconomic neoliberalism, right? So they're playing by the rules of the Washington Consensus. They're paying back World Bank loans, but at the same time they're massively broadening and deepening the Bolsa Familia program, which is a conditional cash transfer program, which took millions out of poverty. They were able to eradicate hunger. One of the most significant things that they were able to bring in more workers into the formal economy, and they strengthened kind of remuneration in the formal economy. So they significantly increased year-on-year minimum wages, which is in some ways probably the most significant development and significant improvement in living standards that was brought in under PT. Those are the sort of the main things. We could kind of go into other details about what they did, but the important thing is that these are significant gains in a country which has never really seen a government operating in the interests of the majority.
Right.
So it's an immense forward step, and yet you step back and you go, but it's still quite limited. These were not structural transformations to the economy.
Right.
There's a question about whether that would even have been possible kind of once they were in government. The need to strike deals, the makeup of Congress, maybe those structural transformations wouldn't have been possible.
Yep.
But what they didn't do, and this I think tells a little bit about why they were able to be deposed. And I just want to be clear that the blame is on the right. The blame is on the right for the soft coup, but PT did things which didn't help its case later on, which is to say two reforms that they could have carried out, which they didn't, would have been political reform to kind of clean up this dirty Congress, create a more representative situation, one where these small parties don't flourish and depend on the state. Mm-hmm. And the other thing would have been media reform, to break up what is one of the world's largest media conglomerates, Globo, which exercises a significant weight in Brazilian, not just the media landscape, but in politics. And those two things would have certainly strengthened its position when the economic winds changed, and consequently the right decided we're not playing ball anymore.
So then right. So then when was it that the right, I mean, it was in my understanding is it started in Dilma Rousseff, who was, Lula's successor, not the same sort of charismatic figure, but actually also a very, very interesting and intelligent and competent figure, at least legislatively or governance-wise in her own right. It started in her first term, and it obviously accelerated in her second term because she was removed. When did this sort of, when did the peace stop? And was this a just sort of backlash of Brazilian ruling classes, or you look at things like the Atlas Project, sort of like funding kind of like libertarian propaganda in Latin America. There does seem to be this broader pattern that across Latin America we went from, when Lula was in power for a while, he represented the very moderate center left in a region that, good and bad had some, at least rhetorically, some serious left governments. And then there was this backlash and reverse wave, which really led a lot of governments to the right. So I guess what I'm saying was there something new in Brazil in the back? Like there was the backlash, but it also seemed like there was a lot of social forces kind of yearning actually to return to things like military dictatorship and traditional race and class hierarchies.
Right, and I think it's important to. My interpretation of these, and I think I'll stand by this, that it is the soft coup is a rolling coup. It is not a plot or a conspiracy which has come from the outside, like, right, we're going to take these guys down, because that doesn't entirely make sense. Like, PT are so moderate, the Brazilian bourgeoisie can work with them. They do strike deals with them, and they have good, they had a good time. They had a really good time. They had a much better time than the lives of the poor. Despite however much those lives improved, loads of billionaires were created. So it doesn't entirely explain why, whether it's the U.S. or fractions of the Brazilian bourgeoisie get together to plot there to take them down.
Right.
That isn't to say there is no there is no conspiring at all. There is, but it's a rolling coup, and it's an emergent process where loads of different factors come in. So let me just kind of go through those.
Yeah.
Dilma's elected, and it's probably Lula's greatest victory was to get this relative unknown and relatively uncharismatic figure, Dilma Rousseff, elected in 2010. She gets reelected in 2014 in a narrower contest, but she still wins by a fair margin. A much wider margin than kind of recent U.S. elections, for example. I think the moment that the center right loses for the fourth time in a row the presidential election in 2014, they decide we need to take her down. But there's something that predates this, and something that isn't discussed enough, I think, in international media to understand Brazil in 2018, even 2017, and even 2016, which is to say the June 2013 protests, which was a massive wave of protests which erupted out of the blue and took all observers by surprise. I was not living in Brazil at the time, and I was like kind of glued to news at the time, just trying to understand what was going on. It was a bus fares protest, kind of led by a sort of autonomous group campaigning for free transport. That then faces police repression, and the thing explodes, right? And we've seen kind of similar. I mean, for listeners who aren't familiar with that case, you can think about the Gezi Park protests in Turkey or various other kind of sudden mobilizations which don't take a determinate political form, aren't led by a political party, are pretty broad-based with a whole range of different demands all spilling out at once. The Arab Spring even starts like that, right? Yep. So this happens, and because of its lack of leadership at the time, it becomes increasingly channelized by the right towards a narrow anti-corruption discourse, a moralistic anti-corruption discourse, which increasingly targets the Workers' Party. Right. This really is a sort of a blob, right? It's kind of changing shape. It's moving. In 2014, it's more focused around the World Cup, kind of these campaigns that say we're not going to have the World Cup, or we need a different World Cup. We need a popular World Cup against wasting of, kind of these big white elephant projects and so on. But by 2015, it is solidified into a right-wing street movement, and new street movements pop up. Protest movements, one called Come to the Streets, another one called kind of on the Indignados Online, I guess, is one way to translate it. Another one is the Free Brazil movement, which has now just become a quite hard right movement, which they set up as a sort of libertarian thing and became hard right. But they lead these really big street protests, and that puts a lot of pressure on the Workers' Party and puts a lot of pressure on Dilma, who at the same time has decided to roll back from her sort of developmentalist program from her first term and to start implementing all the austerity that the right demands, or nearly all of it. So that loses.
So actually, that's interesting, because, and this is obviously you know far more than me, but things like the bus protests, which I did follow to some extent, and certainly the stuff around the World Cup and the Olympics, those protests struck me. You said Gezi, which were left protests, right? Yeah. And so they struck me as anti-austerity protests. And I remember even, there was actually very interesting footage of Lula meeting with some youth protesters and essentially giving them actually kind of like an Obama style, don't give up on the process, but, you're doing exactly what you should be doing. And sort of like, this is what you need to do if you want to kind of push us in the right direction, essentially.
Except that wasn't entirely the Workers' Party response.
Well, not legislatively. I mean, you just explained that Dilma, actually was totally capitulating. But I'm more interested in how did what started as an anti-austerity process turn into an anti-corruption, anti-politics, and then turn to a hard right movement? How did that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed, how did that happen? I can't say that I have a kind of absolutely clear answer on how that happened. I think we're still seeing it unfold in a way, and so we're still examining it. I mean, it was absolutely a democratic protest in the sense of making social democratic demands. It was for better hospitals, better schools, against corruption, just for the creation of a social state, really. And this was, a lot of kind of young people who had recently got into university, probably the first of their the first generation in their family to get to university, who in some ways have been disappointed by the lack of progress under the Workers' Party. And so for all that, loads of people were, 40 million were lifted out of poverty. It was a bit uneven. And so some people were still feeling the pinch there, or were disappointed by the lack of progress. And these democratic demands then somehow become channeled towards this anti-corruption discourse, right? Which targets the Workers' Party as somehow this gang of corrupt politicians which has come into power, taken the state away from its natural owners, and ruled in the most corrupt manner possible, just basically emptying the coffers of the state. That was the sort of discourse that emerged.
So that's on the street.
This was led by the corporate media.
Right. Okay.
And it depends who you talk to. Some people say that these were the June 2013 days. That's what they're called. Some people say that by late June or July or August of that year, they had already become kind of right wing. I don't quite buy that. I think it was a longer term process, but because it was so inchoate, because it didn't have any leadership, because it had a kind of flurry of demands, but pointing in various different directions, it was able to be channeled by those with the wherewithal and the kind of institutional power to drive that into a different direction.
When does the legal process start? Car wash, the Petrobras investigation, and what have we actually learned about, the charges against Lula? Maybe you could just give us a brief tour here. What was Dilma actually removed from office for? What are the charges against Lula? And then more broadly, if we're going to consider all of it, what are the corruption charges, as an example, leveled against the current acting president of this, current far-right government at the moment?
So, just to state the kind of the three major factors behind soft coup, the kind of backdrop. So you've got a sudden mass mobilization, street protests, which hadn't really been a major factor over the preceding decade, suddenly as of 2013 become a regular feature of Brazilian life, especially in the big cities, and of all sorts, right? So it's suddenly like Brazilians are going to the street all the time. The second thing is the end of the commodities super cycle, which is basically, it's the 2008 crisis hitting Brazil in a delayed fashion. The PT had actually managed to, through fiscal policy, to avoid that for a long time and to delay its impact. But then it hits, and it hits hard, and it starts in 2014, 2015, 2016. Brazil's in a deep depression. Those are two factors. The other one then, as you said, is the beginning of the car wash investigations, which really begin in earnest in 2014 and explode in 2015. It starts with a money laundering operation at a car wash, hence the name. And they, through the use of plea bargaining, it kicks up the ranks of politicians, right? So everyone's kind of submitting plea bargains on someone else, and the thing just explodes and broadens and broadens and broadens. What ends up taking down Dilma Rousseff has nothing to do with that. They tried to get her on that, and they couldn't find any evidence. Right. So they've decided we need to take her out after the 2014 elections. The center-right have decided we need to take her out. Enough is enough. We can't trust the Workers' Party to implement the degree of austerity that we demand. And there's recordings and there's statements even after the fact saying the reason why she had to be impeached was because she didn't sign up to our Bridge to the Future plan, which was confected mainly by the PMDB, by Temer's government. Right now,
the current government of Michel Temer,
the current illegitimate government, which was this brutal austerity plan, a 20-year constitutional ceiling on state budgets, right, on the federal budget. So this austerity program, they decided that the Workers' Party couldn't be trusted with this, so they've got to take her out. They finally settle on impeachment, and I think this is the point against the idea that this was a completely premeditated plot that was seen out to the letter. They don't know what the hell they're doing, right? These are, and the important point, they are not fit to rule Brazil because they are incapable of overseeing Brazilian development, and they're incapable of even overseeing this, this kind of undemocratic, anti-democratic transition. Right. They just seize on things, and then things become worse, and they try to firefight, and you end up in a situation today where you basically got the second most likely person to win the elections this year to be a far right, even fascist candidate. So
yeah, we'll get to that in a few minutes. Yeah,
but just to paint the picture that this is an emergent rolling coup, and they don't know what they're doing. So they settle on impeachment. They settle on the most flimsy grounds, which is basically what is called like a fiscal maneuvering, where Juma took credit from state budgets to then pay them back later. The kind of most minute thing which like no one but the most kind of geeky think tank types would even care about or even know what it means.
The analogy I've drawn is that, if the Republicans actually got the votes together to impeach Obama for, a CBO score being used in a budget that they didn't agree with. I mean, it really is almost on that level.
It is that level, and it passed, and everyone, I think this is what really made the kind of global news. I imagine your listeners will have seen this, was the vote in Congress for this, where people dedicating their votes for the impeachment to everything from like their family to God to their dog to the military leader who oversaw torture during the military dictatorship, which was probably the most disgusting spectacle of all.
Because Dilma was tortured herself when she was a guerrilla fighter, which is in the beginning of her career. I mean, right. So it's sort of doubly disgusting.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that outrages everyone, and even the international media tone changes, because before that everyone's going, oh, all these people are on the streets demanding an end to corruption. They must be great. Let's back them. They're all waving the national flag. Yay. Kind of a completely uncritical approach to that.
Right.
Suddenly they kind of go, wait, but all these, these imbeciles, these corrupt pieces of crap are impeaching her on the most flimsy grounds, and supposedly these are the people who are going to lead to a better Brazil. Hang on a second. So then the kind of tone of international reporting even changes.
Right.
And that's the major first stage of the coup, I guess, of the soft coup, her impeachment. Then they bring in this massive austerity program, the constitutional ceiling on spending, which I've already mentioned. They try to get pension reform passed. They don't manage it, but they basically rip up Brazil's long-standing labor rights structure.
Mm-hmm.
This is by no means perfect. It was a kind of a corporatist, Mussolini-inspired sort of thing. So again, by no means perfect, but to rip up these labor rights, guaranteeing certain benefits, salaries, and so on, leads to a much more precarious situation, right? So it's a deliberate creation of greater precarity under Brazilian capitalism.
And I mean, just briefly, I just want to say too, when I was mentioning things like the Atlas Project earlier, I totally agree with you. I don't think this was some sort of premeditated, pre-concocted plot, but I do think that, in the same way that, ALEC isn't a conspiracy, it's just a playbook for state to state, far-right politics and those who want to serve, those corporate interests. I think, similarly, that's essentially the same model in Latin America. So you don't need to have any type of pre-plan or instigation. You just need to have a, kind of model and an ideology set and a strategy for, utilizing the organic uprisings in the way that, you've just painted so well for us. Really briefly, what is the actual, he's going to jail for 12 years. And I think undoubtedly the bigger story here is this coup process, soft coup, judicial coup process, and the fact that it's a maneuver for brutal austerity. But I'm not, I think it's a travesty, but that's like the big story. But what's the substance of the actual charge against Lula? And is the evidence, I guess, I have a bias obviously, but is the evidence as sketchy as it appears?
It is. And a lot of, kind of top legal commentators have cast doubt on the substance of the evidence. And even, this was remarkable. One of the leading anti-pechista, so anti-workers' parties, newspaper columnists of the right, consistently hostile over the past 3 years to the Workers' Party, came out and said, wrote an opinion piece last week saying, you know what, this is dodgy. Right. So if even he's saying it, it is dodgy.
Right.
Do I think Lula is innocent? No, as we discussed, he was corrupted. I don't think he was personally corrupt, but I do think that he was corrupted. He played the game, as we discussed kind of earlier on.
Right.
So, But the actual substantive charge of the charges against him is that he received a gift which was unregistered, which was a beachfront apartment, a triplex in a kind of middling seaside town. It's not even like the swankiest thing that could be imagined as a gift.
Right.
I'm sure much grander gifts have been doled out to Brazilian politicians over the years. So, but there's nothing tying him to this. It's not under his name. They don't have any concrete evidence. So even if you think, and most of the Brazilian right think he's definitely guilty, they don't have the evidence. And if you're doing this in the name of the rule of law, of transparency, and so on, well, you've got to play by your own rules and make sure that you've got that evidence. Right. They don't. And the whole process has been really expedited relative to similar other cases. So it's been done at about twice the speed. So the initial judgment, the appeals process, the decision to imprison him now with appeals still pending, which isn't the normal way this should happen. But they wanted their victory. And the leading investigator, who's also the kind of investigating judge, who's also the prosecutor, wanted his victory. He wanted to get Lula in prison, which has been
the judge is also the prosecutor. I just want
exactly.
To sink
this
that
is
in.
The Brazilian legal system is really antiquated. It's kind of inherited from Portugal, from the kind of early modern period, and it's called a kind of neo-inquisitorial system, which is deeply problematic, as you can imagine. So,
I think that's fair.
But Moro wanted his victory, wanted to take Lula in. I compared it in an article I wrote for Jacobin last week to this is George W. Bush on the aircraft carrier declaring mission accomplished in May 2013 in Iraq. Right. So you can think, greatly premature.
Or May 20th, 2003, right?
Sorry, 2003. Yeah. It was premature. It was a vain act and ultimately disastrous, because what comes after is not a victory at all, but effectively the kind of the corruption and downfall of the Brazilian Republic, which is kind of what I think happens.
So then, all right, there's three different things I want to touch on as briefly as we can, but we can't leave the conversation without it. So I guess we'll get back to Lula in the context of the presidential race, and then maybe even some of the broader regional dynamics briefly. But I want to just bring into this conversation, because you did mention that there is an overtly fascist candidate, and you actually used that term, carefully and non-provocatively, who is, in fact, with Lula taken out, probably the lead contender to be president of Brazil.
Yep.
There's a whole other context in Brazil that is another area we could criticize the Workers' Party, I think, pretty rigorously for, of not addressing, police violence and police killings, also paramilitaries that are sort of at the nexus of kind of police corruption and systemic organized crime and their relationship to politics, a deep violence. And this was exemplified in the assassination of a prominent a city councilor and activist a couple of weeks ago as well, which some on the right actually celebrated. And, you'll explain her in a second, but this is not Workers' Party. I mean, this is somebody much more of the, sort of much more significant left and rooted in, urban communities that are still subject to just tremendous violence throughout all of these periods.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with any of that, and I think that's a perfect summation of it. But just to paint you a picture of the mood of anti-petismo as a way of segueing.
And what was her name? I realize I totally neglected.
So Marielle Franco, yes. And her driver Anderson as well were both assassinated. Right. And that is probably tied to local militias who now control more territory in Rio de Janeiro than do the drug gangs. Right. To be explicit about who these militias are off-duty or former policemen, right? Military policemen, and even military officers as well, or military privates. And you're right to say that this is something that the workers' government didn't tackle over the period. So the kind of degree of urban violence is a major factor, and is something that, if it becomes the major topic of the elections, the security situation, that favors the right. And so we can maybe get onto a little bit in a second about kind of what the state of play is with the upcoming elections. But to paint a picture of anti-petismo, as it's called, anti-Workers' Party sentiment, but which really applies to the whole of the left. It's not just the Workers' Party. So what have you had recently? You had Lula's traveling caravan was shot at a couple of weeks ago while he was touring the South.
Right.
That's bad enough. No one was hurt. They just shot at the bus. But to make things worse, São Paulo's governor, who has run and lost for the presidency against Lula in 2006 and is set to run again, he came out immediately and said, well, this is the Workers' Party reaping what it sows. If you have a rhetoric of division and us and them, this is what you get, which is really shocking. And I really do not like to use the word fascist because I think it's used as an insult rather than a scientific term. I try to avoid using it. But is this not fascist rhetoric to say that if you pursue class politics in one of the most uneven societies in the world, then you deserve violence and repression in response? So that's really worrying, and that just paints a little bit of a picture. There's other little examples which I can paint. So there's a brothel owner, owns the biggest kind of chain of brothels in Brazil, who's actually been found guilty of tax evasion and isn't in prison because he had his habeas corpus rights upheld, something that Lula didn't have. He's promising a month's free beer to anyone who kills Lula in prison. Lula, on his way to prison, being taken in an airplane, there was a recording which was captured of kind of guards taking him to prison in the airplane, saying, we should really throw this trash out the window, meaning Lula. Yep. And then someone comes on the radio going, we shouldn't be talking about this. Can you please change frequency? So this just paints a little picture of the hostility of the Brazilian right to Lula, to the Workers' Party, and to the left. And this hostile atmosphere does breed support for this kind of hard right authoritarian candidate, Jair Bolsonaro. But it also, beyond that, even if you think that, and some people are saying that maybe his ceiling is such that he isn't that much of a threat, that he should be able to be defeated by a more centrist candidate. The thing is in Brazil today is that there hardly are any centrist candidates. I mean, you could say that Lula and the Workers' Party embody the Brazilian political center better than anyone else.
That's what I would say. Yes,
they are the center and the guarantors of the social rights embedded in the 1980 Constitution. They best represent that. They are the political center. The parties of the center right, who should, theoretically be part of the kind of big center, the Centrão, as it's called here, they are increasingly moving to the right, both economically and in terms of security, in terms of repression, and so on, as the quote I just mentioned from the São Paulo governor of the supposedly social democratic center-right party attests to. So in this atmosphere, it's very hard for us to imagine what a kind of centrist candidacy looks like. And what's actually been going on, the Brazilian elite has been doing what my collaborator Benjamin Fogel memorably called the Tinder strategy. So this is what the Brazilian elite are doing. It's a Tinder strategy. They keep swiping right until something matches. There's like tons and tons of candidates on the right, all running. And none of them kind of are garnering massive support, much less than Lula and less than Bolsonaro, the far right candidate. And I think the elite's just hoping that one of these catches fire and that they'll just throw their weight behind that guy if he seems to have any sort of popularity. But this shows how desperate the right is, So for all that the left is in a complete mess and is on the back foot, the right's also a mess. The right's really fragmented and they don't have any support. So
what's the strategy? I mean, it's so obvious. I mean, if Lula could run, I think all opinion polls suggest he would win again, in spite of all of this, this political terrorism from the right. So what is the strategy here? I mean, does it have to be mass mobilization? Is there an electoral strategy? What can be done?
So, let's start with one thing. So the kind of main left candidates, other than Lula or whoever his stand-in is from the Workers' Party, you've got the Party of Socialism and Liberty running a candidate, someone who I've mentioned party I've mentioned before, and is the assassinated Marielle Franco's party. You've got the PCdoB, one of the Brazilian Communist Party, a kind of ex-Maoist party, but which is the most sort of nationalist on the left, I suppose, also running a candidate, which they haven't done for years and years. And they're now talking about creating a broad front against fascism. Right. I'm not sure what that actually means, because if you're creating a broad front, it has to be more than just left unity. You have to bring in the center, you have to bring in liberals and so on who are also concerned. But as I've just painted, the bottom has fallen out of that kind of liberal center. So I'm not really sure what a broad front means beyond just saying us leftists should huddle together. Electorally, I'm not sure what is going to happen. I mean, there's suggestion that Lula will throw his weight behind, because he's not going to be able to run. I mean, he's going to be discounted from the electoral game. Both the judiciary, the media, and so on will not have gone to the lengths that they've gone over the past years to discredit and take out of office the Workers' Party to then allow Lula to run and win.
It's a coup. I mean, that's it.
It is. It's flagrantly anti-democratic.
Right.
And for all that Lula might be guilty of these corruption charges, taking someone out of the race who has 40% of voting intentions is anti-democratic, whatever way you look at it. Right. So maybe he's going to be able to do as he did with Juma and throw his support to someone else, and that'll be enough to see them over the line, or at least to make it to the second round. It's unclear. Mobilization is necessary. I think that the kind of message from most of the Brazilian left is we have to defend Lula, not Lula as a candidate nor as his program, but to defend Lula's right to be free and to run in the election.
That's
as
how
a
I
basic
see it.
democratic
Right.
demand. And I think that's absolutely correct.
Right.
Lula's imprisonment is anti-democratic. So, and it signals Brazil's elite break with democracy. This is supposedly their republic, right? And they don't believe in it. They don't back it. They've broken with all institutional and constitutional norms. Let's talk a little bit, if we got a second, I guess.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
So in terms of what the left's strategy is, or at least let's talk about program, because what is missing so far, and what I'd like to see more of, it'll be interesting to see over the coming weeks and months, whether there's a real developmentalist strategy that's put forward, because there's only one candidate on the kind of center left who really proposes a developmentalist program. And, we know that the possibilities for a sort of left developmentalism are narrow. That you don't have a huge room for maneuver if you really confront international capital and pursue much more protectionistic means as a means of development. You're gonna face serious problems, right? There might be capital flight. You impose capital controls and so on. So it's unclear where that leads. But I do think that needs to be a major plank of the program, and the way for the left to win, at least electorally, would be to foreground the economy, because the right doesn't really want to talk about it. They just want to talk about security. Mm-hmm. And so to push the economy forward and to push the question of unemployment and wages would be the way forward. So we'll see what happens there.
That sounds evocative of everywhere else in terms of what the left strategy should be. But final question. I mentioned this last night when you did a brief update on my show, basically the sort of radical critique going back to Marx, which all of a sudden seems to be sort of disturbingly relevant, that essentially that if Lula cannot, if that model is not workable, where he actually created all the flaws we've documented, but there's another way of reading the guy as just the sort of ultimate win-win politician. He created a system where, the elites were placated. They didn't have a meltdown. There was no structural reform. So they were beyond taken care of, setting aside all normative and structural considerations. And then tens of millions of people are lifted out of poverty. And also the guy leaves, office with a plus 80% approval rating. In that, if the Brazilian state, and in the context of a broader global pattern that we can see of emergent far right governance and basically capital sort of saying no. we talked about the Ryan budget before you came on, right? Like, we cannot even have the most minimal small scale social interventions. It all needs to be eaten up in the kind of final dash to eat up whatever little commons remain to redistribute to the 0.1% or shareholder classes. What does that mean for? I think even the most radical among us our default setting is, can we figure out some type of social democracy? If we're being real, because that's even all that we can imagine in many cases. If we're being real, this to me shows like that it's becoming, if Lula can't do it, if this model doesn't work, then then that game is over.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think we can say that the politics of the semi-periphery are the same as that in the core.
Sure.
But nevertheless, let me just talk a little bit about what Lula's model was, what Lulismo fundamentally is as a way of saying why this can't work anymore. So Lulismo is basically class conciliation. It is an alliance between organized workers, some of the poor, and this is an electoral alliance rather than anything else, but the working class, the poor, with support of the so-called patriotic domestic bourgeoisie. So in Brazil, kind of construction, agribusiness, and so on, who would lend him support, would fund the party, and so on. That model does not work anymore, as we've seen, because either that so-called patriotic domestic bourgeoisie does not exist because they're not patriotic, they don't want to play ball anymore, or certain sections of it have been devastated by the anti-corruption investigations, specifically and above all construction. So that model just does not work anymore. And the kind of representatives of that sort of alliance, the PMDB, this kind of really big corrupt cartel party that occupies a lot of Brazilian politics. This is the President Temer's party. The Workers' Party still kind of seem to be, creating alliances with them. Certainly at the local level, they continue to do so. So they're still in bed with their hangmen, basically.
Yep.
And so it seems they have not learned the lesson that, if you lay with dogs, you're going to get fleas, and probably a lot worse than fleas has happened to the Workers' Party right now.
Right.
So that model doesn't work. So it needs to be a much more confrontational approach from the left.
Yep.
There's no two ways about it. But to how far can that be? Can you be confrontational in terms of in real policy terms? That I'm not really clear on. To kind of refer back a little bit more historically and to make a callback to what you were talking about. I think throughout the 20th century, certainly the second half of the 20th century, the condition of reform was revolution, right? It was a threat of revolution at home, as well as the threat of the Soviet Union, which held together this compact of kind of moderate reformism. Nowadays, that's not the case. And I would wager that it's maybe the opposite, that the condition for a possible future revolution would be reform today, to get those wheels of reformism moving. And I think the ceiling for and the kind of room for maneuver of capital today is so limited that they do not allow the outside to come into politics, right? This is what's happened in Brazil, right?
Yep.
So Lula was allowed during the good times to kind of manage Brazilian capitalism. Now they don't tolerate that anymore. So I think very quickly, if you start kind of pushing for reforms, you're going to face some serious barriers. And who knows if the left president is elected in October 2018, how long they'll even last. I don't want to be too gloomy about it, but it doesn't look too sunny.
But maybe the only global lesson though is, I mean, first of all, that you do literally need street mobilization to go alongside this stuff, because if you aren't in some type of constant mobilization, this will just get run out anyways. And then number two, in a way, of course, you need, if you're going to govern in this context, you can't have socialism in one country, right? You can't, you can't totally throw out the global macroeconomic playbook, or you're going to have a meltdown, even if you are like the UK. But at the same time, you might as well push the dial to the most sort of radical end of possibility of governance, because they're going to respond to you with the same ferocity and insanity anyways.
Even if you play nice.
Even if you play nice, right. I mean, look at Lula and Obama, right? I mean, how much nicer can you be? Lula's in prison and Obama's a communist Muslim antichrist.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is possible. There's a lot more room for maneuver in the US,
right,
and even in the UK, just for example,
right,
than there is in Brazil.
Right.
And I think in Brazil, given the global context, given the fact that the pink wave is over, so you don't have, the kind of regional support that there was, you don't have the commodities super cycle to be able to actually spend on things. In that context, the room for maneuver in Brazil is a lot more limited.
Right.
And I think we have to be conscious of this. And if you start pushing too hard, you're going to have a fork in the road, and either you moderate your demands or you go Cuba. And, I'm not sure what I'd choose there. So
I'm getting disturbed by what answer I might have for that. Alex, I appreciate your time. Alex Hochuli, he is the producer and co-host of the Alpha Bunga Bunga Global Politics podcast, of which I'm a happy subscriber to. He's also a writer and researcher. You can find regular pieces really essential pieces on Brazil and Jacobin and other outlets based in Sao Paulo. Alex, thanks so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the fun half, dude. It's the fun half. Become a member of the Majority Report, majority.fm/become a member. That's how you access the fun half. You can also go to justcoffee.coop. Coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. You can check out my show at patreon.com/TMBS or on iTunes and our YouTube channel. Watch the whole friggin' thing. Jamie Peck has a Patreon. She also has an Antifada podcast.
Oh, yeah. We're doing our hard launch episode this weekend. So anyone who wants to submit a question for our friend Liza Featherstone, who writes an advice column in The Nation, you can join and submit questions through Discord.
She's a smarty. Yes, those are all the ways. Join all of these things. We'll see you in the fun half. 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. The IAMs will be on. Sorry, everybody, haven't called into the phones. Just 1 second. Let's see. Let's start with some sound. Mark Zuckerberg was at the Senate yesterday, and it was an utterly meaningless spectacle. Senators like to call in various corporate misdoers into the Senate and the House, and then get some clips where they berate them and look like they're protecting the public interest, and then do nothing about it. And that was essentially what happened yesterday with Mark Zuckerberg. But this exchange with Senator Bill Nelson from Florida, who I hate to tell you, pretty soon I'm going to be encouraging you to go vote for in his re-election campaign. He, the frame of this question is awe-inspiring. This is a United States senator with regulatory authority talking to the head of arguably the most significant sector of the American economy and the emerging and the global economy. And the whole point and context of this hearing is that Facebook needs oversight and is at in the most benign scenario has engaged in massive errors, if not outright unethical practices, is in need of serious reform. Check out how Bill Nelson frames this question to Zuckerberg.
Mr. Zuckerberg, good afternoon. Let me just cut to the chase. If you and other social media companies do not get your act in order, none of us are going to have any privacy anymore. That's what we're facing. We're talking about personally identifiable information that, if not kept by the social media companies from theft, a value that we have in America being our personal privacy, we won't have it anymore. It's the advent of technology, and of course, all of us are part of it. From the moment that we wake up in the morning until we go to bed, we're on those handheld tablets. And online companies like Facebook are tracking our activities and collecting information.
That's a fucking good point.
Yeah, but it's not totally a fucking good point, Joe, because the whole purpose of being in the Senate is that you can say things like, and I would argue that actually there's a much, much broader need for regulation of all Silicon Valley, as well as anti-monopoly efforts, in some cases absolutely nationalization. But he didn't say, listen, kid, you effed up. So I have a piece of legislation that I'm going to push to ensure privacy for your users and penalties for your mishaps. He just said, our privacy's in your hands, 30-something android who's already proven that you have absolutely no even passing ethical or policy concern. In fact, your entire business model is built on mining data. And that is why I'm going to play this exchange where we're violating the make assholes look sort of good rule, because one, Orrin Hatch is in fact just being an asshole here, but finally an asshole to someone who deserves some of that treatment. And there's some sort of basic reality we're getting to here that, like, what is Facebook's actual business model? And the sort of the disingenuousness of Zuckerberg's response here.
Doing that.
Well, if so, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
I see. That's
right. Yeah. They don't just run ads. They data mine and traffic in every single aspect of human information and traffic in who you are to every interested party in the planet, right? So that, like, all of the issues that people are freaking out about with Cambridge Analytica and Russians and fake news and all of this stuff. First of all, I'm terrified, and you should be too, of what Facebook's internal mechanisms for regulating quote-unquote fake news are, okay? That's going to scoop up also, yes, it might hurt some conspiracy Alex Jones garbage. It's also jeopardizes investigative journalism on CIA abuses in Afghanistan, right? If you're just doing algorithmically and you have no contextual insight, there's no distinction made in that type of thing. And that's why we've seen massive drops in, I think it was Alternet's content as an example on Facebook and other, lefty outlets, which, whatever their problems, are not conspiracy theory rags. And then, so yes, saying that Facebook just sells ads is like saying that, I don't know, Lockheed Martin helps people transport themselves. Like, it's sort of technically true, but very misleading as to the actual reach and nature of the company.
To help with connectivity.
And they do help with connectivity. Actually, I've been finding a lot of connectivity. I look at Facebook and I look at some of my connectivity, and I'm not sure I want that connectivity.
We connect you to fascists.
Yeah, all right. We connect you to fascists. It was a personal pipeline to the fascist perspective.
What if fascists wanted a voice in your government?
What if fascists want? So we thought to ourselves, what if fascists wanted to spread propaganda directly to you? This is Lindsey Graham, and we actually have a theory as to why Lindsey was so tough with Zuck. But this is also a legitimate question.
If I buy a Ford and it doesn't work well and I don't like it, I can buy a Chevy. If I'm upset with Facebook, what's the equivalent product that I can go sign up for?
Well, there's the second category that I was going to talk about.
I'm not talking about categories. I'm talking about, is there real competition you face? Because car companies face a lot of competition. If they make a defective car, it gets out in the world, people stop buying that car, they buy another one. Is it an alternative to Facebook in the private sector?
Yes, Senator. The average American uses 8 different apps to communicate with their friends and stay in touch with people, ranging from texting apps to email.
Which is the same service you provide?
Well, we provide a number of different services.
Is Twitter the same as what you do?
It overlaps with a portion of what we do.
You don't think you have a monopoly?
It certainly doesn't feel like that to me.
Okay. So it doesn't. So Instagram, you bought Instagram. Why did you buy Instagram?
Because they were very talented app developers who were making good use of our platform and understood our values.
It was a good business decision. My point is that one way to regulate a company is through competition, through government regulation. Here's the question that all of us got to answer. What do we tell our constituents, given what's happened here, why we should let you self-regulate? What would you tell people in South Carolina that, given all the things we've just discovered here, it's a good idea for us to rely upon you to regulate your own business practices?
Well, Senator, my position is not that there should be no regulation. Okay. I think the internet is increasingly important.
Do you embrace regulation?
I think the real question, as the internet becomes more important in people's lives, is what is the right regulation, not whether there should be or not.
But you as a company welcome regulation?
I think if it's the right regulation, then yes.
You think the European...
If it's written by the lobbyists that we have just contracted on K Street and it caters to all of our policy demands and also blocks us from future competition.
Yes, and locks us in as a monopoly.
Locks us in as a monopoly. I would absolutely support that. Why did we buy Instagram? Snapchat was making an aggressive play, and they were actually stupid enough to think that this is somehow actually still an up-for-grabs marketplace. So what we did was we went over to Instagram, we offered them a play, and now Snapchat is totally irrelevant. You can get nude pictures from random girls on Instagram and use less data in your phone, which is really going to matter when you guys peel back net neutrality. Use logic.
Regulation, then yes.
You think the Europeans have it right?
I think that they get things right.
Have you ever submitted? That's true. So would you work with us in terms of what regulations you think are necessary in your industry?
Absolutely.
Okay. Would you submit to us some proposed regulations?
Yes, and I'll have my team follow up with you so that way we can have this discussion across the different categories where I think that this discussion needs to happen.
Privacy, no. Competition, no. Locking in our algorithms as proprietary and exclusive, yes. Voting on Facebook in a way that is easily... What if you wanted an election to be hacked? That was a question we asked ourselves. I mean, look, it's funny. I mean, obviously, I mean, it's not just that Facebook is a monopoly. The big four, right? I mean, the big five, rather. I mean, Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook. That's the big four. They control essentially every single aspect of most people's user experience on the internet. And this is the most important part of how people interact with our economy, in many ways socially, and also the future of journalism, content, democratic participation, and machine learning. I mean, it is all built on commons that are foundationally private platforms. It's not even, I mean, that is like, Lindsey Graham should have been asking this question 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I think it took them a little while to catch up with what was going on there.
Listen, Mr. Zuckerberg, I am neither sexually attracted to you, nor do I think you have the opportunity to get us into a war with Iran and North Korea. So I'm not in the mood to ask you softballs.
Hit the bricks, pal.
You went there. You took it there. I can't wait.
I miss a Lindsay impression.
I
also just feel weird every time. Like, he was actually very good there, and he still is like a horrifying warmonger. So I just feel weird not at least making fun of him a little bit.
It's going to be nice after the Rev when Zuck's head is on a pike and we can all use Commie Book in a nice way and just keep in touch with our families.
To help with connectivity.
Connectivity. Just to be clear, she doesn't mean that literally.
Oh, yeah, no.
Not literally.
This is the irony bike bell.
Yeah, thank you. That was the that was the way in which we deployed our new irony bike bell. No, I look forward to re-educating Zuck. Actually,
Yeah,
not me
totally.
personally. I don't really want to be in the same room.
Four
as the guy.
walls are just enough for him.
Wait,
we should think of the best karmic punishment for Zuckerberg for this. Maybe I'll ponder that over the course
I don't
of
even think. The thing about Zuck is it doesn't even it.
I want to be punitive.
Just manual labor, honestly. Like, I don't even think it needs to be all that elaborate. Like, if you just said, dude, like, you're not sitting in front of screens all day. Like, you have to go, like, you just have, you know what? Normal work hours, breaks, proper wage, but just like, you just need to physically build houses and do like brushwork all day.
Landscaping.
Landscaping.
I love that. I would love that.
Yeah.
I like that you have a non-carceral solution for this, as do I.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's not true in all cases, but definitely not true in all cases, but Zuck's okay. Hypnotic Genes. Hey, Michael, your Zuckerberg voice sounds a lot like your Rachel Maddow voice. I could see that. Well, it's kind of like, yeah, no, it is kind of similar. But there's more with the like, I'm Rachel Maddow. Russia. Here is 1979. There is a city council race in Wisconsin. You would think that the candidate wanted to win the race, but did he? No, he did not. And that's a weird history which elucidates exactly what's happening in Russia right now. Random factoid, Russia. Rachel. It is an amazing, I have to say, on that cultural progress level, amazing that we have gone from a country where Bill O'Reilly is the king of cable to a out liberal lesbian. You cannot argue that
Is she
is
the
not
top of the
relative.
ratings
She's the
right now?
top of the heap.
Wow.
That is absolute cultural progress. That's undeniable. All my critiques aside.
I haven't been listening to Maddow since like maybe 2015 or something like that.
Yeah, I haven't
but-
listened
and
to
she
her in
wasn't
years.
even close at that time.
No, not even close. Not even close. But she's firing and all. And yet, you're calling from a 904 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hey, this is James from Jacksonville. I called yesterday.
Hey, what's
and,
going
I
on,
guess it was
James?
a bad
Oh,
signal
yeah, it was a bad connection, but we're good to go today. What's going on?
Yeah, all right. So I wanted to ask about, I guess, like a union that essentially you would have like a state or multiple states together. Obviously, this is theoretical. I don't know if this obviously isn't possible right now, but I don't even know if it's legal. A union between multiple states in which you would like contract the union out for labor. And there would be no competition. There would just be the state union.
Mm-hmm.
And the workers would, have a lot of control over that.
I don't totally understand the question.
Okay, so if it was possible for like a union to, like, I guess, monopolize all the labor in a certain area, you'd be forced to contract out that union for labor within that area. So,
Well, there are actually rules in place, not for specific unions, but in some, like city contracts in Boston, as an example, or in many other places, you have to do union labor for certain contracts. So that's versions of that are in place.
I don't know. I'm trying to find a way to ask it. I guess I'm not asking it properly.
No, I mean,
definitely. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a way in which I guess the worker would have more control over the union. obviously, even though they do have control over unions much more so than a random private company that they would work for, I don't know. I guess, do you think that would, do you think that, if there are some versions of it in place, do you think that's something that we should encourage to happen more?
Well, I would definitely encourage all union labor wherever possible. I mean, if your question is about internal structure of labor unions, that's a little bit of a different issue. And so that's something that I don't have. I know different unions have different characters and different politics related to, the industries they deal with, their own political formations. That's a very interesting field. I don't know, but I don't think those are kind of separate themes. But I would always say that more unions.
Anytime you can
essential.
legislate to make unions have more power. That's
anytime you can legislate for unions, that's a good thing. Thanks so much for the call, man.
All right, thank you.
You're calling from a 917 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Dan calling from New York City.
Sorry, could you say it again?
Dan calling from New York City.
Oh, hey, what's going on, Dan? What's up?
Hey, man, I just wanted to call. I call sometimes to critique the left, and I wanted to discuss one thing, which is that the left, to me, most of the organizations have now been sort of subsumed into the nonprofit industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to sort of discuss the implications of that and what that means and my experiences of what that, ends up representing. And to me, the left, which used to split, you remember the old People's Front of Judea, splitters, routine. The left used to split up into all these parties. And now what we've done is we've split ourselves up into thousands and thousands of NGOs and nonprofits and orgs.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
How are you defining the left here?
Well, I mean everything from radicals to liberals when I'm talking about the left.
Okay.
So I think even radical organizations, many of them, I really like the work that they do. The idea that they can actually make a dent in the corporate state and in corporate power without, in some ways, networking with other like-minded, or until there are, DSA has done a good job of creating chapters and creating a sort of viable networked model. But I don't see that much.
I know you've called in before and you've made very, very similar points. And I think it's worth. I think you're kind of answering your own question there. I mean, I think that some of the things that are emerging now are kind of the answer to this. And I think the bigger issue is, I would kind of flip it on its head and just say, like, if you're dependent on a very limited amount of funding sources, that's obviously going to affect the tenor of what you do and even what you think is possible, even if it's, unconscious. And, the people on the left, even in the very broad way that you're defining it, are at a structural disadvantage in the society. I mean, if you're doing any version of work that deals with inequality or poverty or economics, you are structurally disadvantaged. You're on another team's playing field. And so I think, you're right. And I think the answer is, you kind of answered your own question there. I mean, there's some emergence, and Bernie was a big part of it. And you see it with DSA, and you see it in some other, you see it in Reclaim Idaho. Like, people are starting to self-generate some stuff. And that's obviously going to be super important. I appreciate the call, man. Thanks. Go ahead.
I'm a little confused. Like, I would like an example of a group on the radical anti-capitalist left that has been subsumed by NGOs, because that just sounds like something we don't do.
Well, no, I think you could argue, Black Lives Matter is a very complex thing, but there's definitely, people involved in that movement, which in some ways is a very radical movement that are, definitely NGO funded and have a pretty, much more kind of different set of policies.
I think that NGO angle is trying to neuter the Black Lives Matter movement and make it less radical.
I think even if you don't, I don't think that's, I think it's like the Brazil thing. I don't think that's like a conscious conspiracy. I just think that that's like an inevitable byproduct. But it's hard because on the flip side, like on a real level, if you're trying to actually run something and deal with it, you need to have funding. And that's another thing that is a structural disadvantage for people doing stuff on the left. You're calling from an 847 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this Michael Brooks?
Yes.
This is Congressman Paul Ryan calling it.
Oh, Congressman Ryan. How are you?
Good. Good. The goal, Michael, has always been eradicating poverty. And so I'm stepping down today, but I can assure you that my goal is eradicating poverty, and that means by killing as many poor people as possible.
I had a feeling that this is where the bit was going, Congressman. I have no idea what that was. That was a notification. Did you just give yourself a ding for your point there, Congressman Ryan?
This isn't a bit. This isn't a bit. And so I'm committed to doing as much as I can to kill as many poor people as possible through work with the Koch brothers and stuff like that.
Well, let me just say, I have to run, Congressman Ryan, because I really, truly hate talking to you. But I agree. I appreciate your candor. If Paul Ryan could be more honest about his actual motivations, that would be fucking great. So thank you, Congressman Ryan. Thank you.
You're not open to exchange of ideas?
I am definitely not open to exchange of ideas. I am a very active opponent of the free and fair exchange of ideas. Can you hit me with a little Neanderthal? Please.
All of a sudden, we can't talk about Neanderthal DNA anymore.
He's such a
Scientific
whiny
data can't be racist.
He is such a whiny, aggrieved bitch. Jesus Christ.
Am I inferior to John von Neumann?
Yes.
I don't think so, and I don't think you think so.
I do. Do you remember how during the Obama years, it did become almost like a kind of very funny, anywhere from like sweet to overdone to just outright annoying. But, it would all depend on my mood. Sometimes somebody would post a picture of like Obama, like having a squirt gun fight with a kid. And you'd be like, you know what? This is appropriate because this family is dehumanized by the worst people in the country on a daily basis, by a bunch of, stupid, racist, troglodytic thugs from, everywhere from Fox News to Alex Jones. But then there was other people where, you'd say like, hey, I think we need to actually talk about, the Obama administration's drone policies in Pakistan. And they'd whack you back with Michelle Obama reads to kids. Case closed. But the point being is that it may, whatever side of the like endless pictures that came out of the Obama White House of that family looking like the nice, classy, friendly, approachable, normal people that they were, this White House is a bit starved for those types of moments. I think would be the delicate way of putting it. It's not like on a daily basis there's people like in the Trump orbit, and certainly not the Trump family, like, having a fist bump with a janitor while the two of them smile at each other, or, having any pictures or interactions with children that look anything besides comedic or potentially terrifyingly lecherous. So, do you remember this one first? Wait, this is yeah. This is a good example of the type of thing of how the Trump White House looks in these types of like be a nice, normal person and interacting with kids.
I love it.
Yeah. These kids love me. These kids love me. Love me. Whoa. I came out, I received some of their adoration, and I left because it's weird.
These kids know what's up.
They know what's up. They get it. They get that I'm the best. That was the other thing, is that Obama seemed to have this sort of thing of like, wow, it's so nice to meet you, and what a cool kid with their science project. Not like, oh my God, I really need this adulation from children. If I don't get validation from these school kids, I'm literally going to have a mental breakdown on Twitter tonight. Actually, yeah, let's do a little. This is, we keep teasing it. This is Obama being, really just like the nice dad that he is.
Can you see it? Oh, no, it's a bee. That's okay, guys. Bees, they won't land on you. They won't sting you. They'll be okay.
Whereas, pause it. Whereas, like, of course, there's a bee. Secret Service, get me out of here. Fuck the kids.
Use the kid as a bee shield.
Use the kid as a bee shield to protect me. Right? Like, so we've gone from this sweet, elegant, just, again, on that cultural leadership level, you just can't do better than Barack Obama, right?
Okay. Wait. Hold on! You guys are wild things. You're not supposed to be scared of bees when you're a wild thing.
All right, so so Obama's awesome, and there's nothing like that with the Trump White House. So Fox News needed to search far and wide for something not remotely like that, but I guess of somebody in the Trump White House being quasi-human with kids, and so they found Melania Trump. And after we play this clip, I'm actually going to give you some pretty shocking news about some of my new feelings about Melania Trump.
Welcome to the White House. I'm very excited that you're here today with me. As we see here, we have two boards. No problem. Don't worry, it's just the water, okay?
And that's it. Melania, like, you know what? Again, in this context, I could, like, you dumb little fuck. You destroyed the carpet. You know what? Guess what the president's going to do? He's going to make your family homeless because you just threatened national security. So maybe in the context of the, demented mental case that runs the country, her saying, like, it's okay, it's just the water, is, like, really special and sweet. But that is, like, Obama or Michelle being like, it's all right, it's just water. That wouldn't even have been memeable because of the embarrassment of riches of the Obamas being, like, friendly and normal.
Today is the day Melania became the first lady.
Right. It's okay. It's just the water.
It's just the water.
It would be funny if it was coffee or something. She's like, you little prick. First I make marmalade whale man make love inside me, which is the worst. And then he does it to others with no protections. And then I am supposed to be eating at Cipriani's while he is on Howard Stern eating himself to death. And then he becomes presidenties. Now you stain my rug, little prick. In Slovenia, I would drown you in this pool until your disgusting little legs couldn't move anymore. I have never felt bad for Melania Trump. I remember her making comments that we played back in the day where she backed Trump's birtherism. And I just don't find, like, I mean, look, there's plenty of, like, types like Melania Trump, in New York, and, like, that's fine. It's not like no hate, but, like, also no heroism.
I feel empathy for her on some level.
I was gonna say, in the past, I don't know what has flipped in me, but in the past couple of weeks, certainly there's nothing she's done, but I've never had any empathy for her. But it's like at a certain point, it's just like, Jesus Christ. I mean, she's gotten past the point of just like, because she sucks. But most people who just kind of generically suck don't deserve the level of humiliation and nonsense that this woman is subjected to at this point. So I am officially feeling bad. I wouldn't say empathy. I think it's still a less healthy emotion. I feel pity for Melania Trump at this point.
I mean, on a human level, her and Ivanka as well. Like,
Oh,
there
definitely.
has to be
No,
some
Ivanka,
kind of abuse
no.
going on.
Well, Ivanka, you're just
now or in the
demented.
past.
Screw Ivanka.
Yeah, I got empathy.
No, that's insane. Ivanka's the enemy.
I mean, yes.
No, Ivanka. No, there's no sympathy for Ivanka.
No, okay.
Ivanka's totally.
I have sympathy for Ivanka.
I don't want to speculate as to the nature of that sympathy. Very disturbed by that. No, Ivanka was like she's like the only.
Thanks, guys. That's not what we're talking about.
Yes.
I mean, look.
That might be the win sound drop of all time. that actually, you know what? That's why I have such a soft spot for it. That actually is super Leckian. Like that's like an idiot version of Lek, like of you, like when Sam, she's like, what about, do we get enough electrolytes, right, Matt? And you're just like, yeah, I was actually trying to find a new water pipe online. I didn't hear that. What do I do? Oh, yeah, it's not particularly my area of study. That's like the kind of smart guy version. And the dumb guy version is like, yeah, it was when I was researching. It'd be cool if Donald Trump Jr. came here to work for a week.
I'd produce Trump Jr.'s podcast.
Guys,
so what we're talking about.
So what we're talking about, guys. Subscribe to us on Patreon.
Go to Mauritius this weekend.
There is literally no piece of information that could come out about Melania Trump that would make me feel bad for her. I just want to be on record.
I mean, I would send her to the gulag in a second, but I think that would be better than, whatever shit he's subjecting her to.
Well, I'd send her to a gulag that he was also at. That's where I would
Gold-plated gulag.
Jared, Donald, and Ivanka in a room. It's like, it's Jared's fault. Come, let's run away together. Let's be together like we were always meant to be.
Actually,
Cruel and
who's
unusual.
That? Who's that? Is that Sart that does the no exit?
No exit.
That'd be amazing to just have them three for eternity.
like no exit for morons.
Anybody in a room with Trump for eternity would be just terrifying, hellish.
I actually just had a chill run through my body. I contemplate, like, do you think I'm good? Do you think I'm good at business? A lot of people think I'm good at business. And you're just sitting there.
Day 40, good morning.
Yeah. Good morning. You ready to go? Maybe I was thinking, nobody takes walks anymore. You want to watch TV? I'm great at TV. I think I'm the best at who's ever on TV. You're calling from a 512 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Tammy in Texas, Austin.
Tammy, wait, did you talk to Ted Cruz? Was that you?
Yeah.
Do we have that pulled?
Before we get into that, I just want to say, Michael,
Sure.
You were the first person I ever spoke to on the radio.
Oh.
I don't know if you remember.
I do.
I called in about being an atheist and.
Yeah, I
my
do. I
family
didn't know that was
being,
your first call, but I do remember that call. Yep.
And I just wanted to thank you for taking that call and letting me kind of come out of the closet a little bit.
Of course.
And just so you know, I'm all the way. Obviously, if you've seen the video, you know I'm all the way out of the closet now.
Oh, I love it. I haven't seen the video yet. We got to fish it out.
Yeah, we don't have it, but we might.
Please, someone could maybe text.
She tweeted it.
Well,
out.
everybody's seen it. Nobody, trust me.
No, I haven't
like
seen it. I am
the Young
being.
Turks have 250,000 hits. It has 250,000 hits on my post of it. But
Wow.
I've given one interview to Vice News, but I wanted to give you an exclusive to ask me anything you want to know.
So what was the call? What was the plan? I wish that I had watched this, but what was the call? Was it an open, like an AM talk show with Ted Cruz? And did you have it pre-planned what you were going to ask him? And
No.
Okay. Oh, wait, is this it?
It was a campaign.
Oh, Tammy, we're going to play this really quick, and then I'm going to ask you my question.
Pre-existing conditions. I'm not.
Okay, we're going to. Is this ready to play? Okay, and then Tammy, I'm going to come right back to you and ask you.
I'd be trying to read what I want to ask. I'm a woman over 50 who, as of February 7th, has 7 active pre-existing conditions. I'm not counting being female and a survivor of abuse. I purchased my individual policy on the health insurance exchange. If you force me into a high-risk pool, you will either bankrupt me or kill me. I take this risk of medical aggression personally and seriously, and I can assure you I'm not the only Texan who does. My question is, will you pledge to submit to a DNA test to prove that you're human?
Well, ma'am, thank you for that. And one of the great things about our democratic system is that we can treat each other with respect and civility.
Is that a yes or a no?
Ma'am, if you want to engage in insults, that's your prerogative.
No.
But I'm not going to
It's a yes or no question.
Thank you for being here,
It's a
ma'am.
yes or no.
That's
Wow.
amazing. It's beautiful. But my question to you, and this is one of the things that makes Ted Cruz even more disturbing and bizarre to me, is that he actually seems genuinely hurt by that. Was he?
No, I can tell you that this event was a campaign event. He hopscotched all over Texas, anywhere that his private pilot could put down his aircraft, and he could get in and out quickly. He was an hour late.
Right.
The front row was all full of Ted Cruz fans and people that he wanted to talk about, and the purpose for the campaign event was to slag Obamacare. That's what it was all about. Okay.
Did anybody come up to you and support you? I mean, was there anybody else there that was sort of opposed to him, or did you face a lot of hostility?
Gosh, yes.
Oh, okay, tell me. Great.
I was in friendly territory. I didn't plan to film what I did, but I looked behind me at some point during the evening, and a girl that I know from Steiner Ranch Democrats, it's an Austin Democratic Club, she was sitting one row behind me and 3 seats over.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she had a look on her face like she was being walked to the gallows. Her name is Jessica. She hated being there. Me, I had a plan for what I wanted to do. I posted everything I was going to do on Facebook before I did it. The only people that were surprised were Ted Cruz and people who don't follow me on Facebook. I said exactly what I was going to do. I even put up a picture of my cue card because I get nervous around crowds, and I wanted to be able to I knew if I tried to wing it, it would be a nightmare. So I had a little 4x6 card written out what I wanted to say about me. I didn't have the question on there because I was worried that some of Ted Cruz goons might be looking over my shoulder reading what I was going to say.
Right.
And if they saw the question I was going to ask them, they would have yanked me out of there.
Yeah, no, it's smart. Do you think did you choose to make Did you choose to make it end with kind of a dig at him? Because if you just talked about how important the legislation was to you, that you knew he'd go off into some irrelevant lies and spin, so better to just make it awkward and funny.
Well, here's the whole point, and people don't know this. The whole point is to get the word out that Republican healthcare policy is inhuman.
Yep.
Okay? It's inhuman. If you saw somebody on the side of the road with a broken leg crying and screaming, you would stop and help them.
Right.
Because you're a human.
Right.
Just because it's policy doesn't mean it's bloodless. Okay?
Yep.
I knew that if I asked him at the end, will you pledge to support and expand health care for all Americans, that moment would never go viral.
Right.
Never.
Right.
You also
So
wouldn't
what
have
I
gotten
did
any
is-
kind of satisfying answer from him.
Yeah, well, as I said,
No,
he would have just lied and spun.
I sat and listened to him lie for an hour about Obamacare.
Yep.
And had to bite my tongue as he lied and lied and lied.
Right.
And I kept a very calm, serene. I was dressed all in black, wearing a black church lady hat because I'm shy. Hats are my thing. They're like my armor.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that he looked into my eyes held my gaze for seconds at a time during his prepared speech. And I never blinked, and I never let on how much I loathe him as a person and as a political actor.
Right.
Because I wanted the chance to ask him a question. But I will tell you, every time he lied about Obamacare, my heart pounded.
What were some of the lies?
Fury.
What were some of the lies?
Okay, here's one. A person on the front row decided that Obamacare was the devil, so his parents bought into something called Medishare, which is run by churches,
Mm-hmm.
who his parents got into a medical situation that Medishare would not cover, that would have been covered if they had Obamacare. So this person blames Obama for his parents not having their care covered.
Right. Wow. And what does Ted Cruz say?
Yeah, crazy. No, he reads all of this stuff.
Oh, I
out
see.
loud.
Oh, I see. I see.
He doesn't let the people get up and talk.
Gotcha.
He
Oh,
reads-
okay, I see.
And it's somebody who works for him.
Gotcha.
It was, here's what I want you to know, because people have asked me this. And so I'm giving you an exclusive audio of me answering the two big questions. Number one, you looked into his eyes. Did you hurt his feelings? What was going on with that? And I will tell you that there's no one home. Okay?
I believe
there's
that.
There's not a person inside there that can be hurt.
Right. Yes.
Nothing that I said bothered him in the least.
Yeah, he's a monster.
Lying doesn't bother him in the least.
He's an absolute monster.
Well, yeah, I think his answer speaks to the conservative project that you were talking about on your show last night, Michael, which is all about making the oppressors look like the victims.
Right. That is right.
The second question people ask is, did he smell like sulfur? And I can tell you no, but I got close enough to tell you that he smelled like dirty money.
Did he smell? I thought he would smell like catfish that went bad in the sun. That's sort of my read on it.
I have never experienced that.
Yeah.
As a Texan, I should know what that smells like, but I don't.
Yeah, I was trying to get regional with you, Tammy. Come on.
But what I want to say, Michael, to you personally, is when I called in the first time, I read, just like I did with Ted Cruz, I read what I wanted to say. Mm-hmm. You engaged me, and you were empathetic and human, okay? I have no doubts that you have 46 chromosomes just like I do. The point of my video was I don't understand a person like Ted Cruz. I don't understand trying to acquire power so that you can cause harm to other members of your species. I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
And I never will.
Yeah, I don't get it. On that very basic human level, Tammy, it is utterly mystifying to me. I'm as clueless as you are.
Our society selects for sociopathic traits. So most of us aren't going to get that.
There's structural, all sorts of psychiatric, economic, political, absolutely. But on a very, very basic, visceral level, you get it or you don't.
Most people aren't sociopaths.
I appreciate the call, Tammy.
Well,
thanks a million.
What I want to say finally, wait, I have one more thing that I want to say, and that is, these shows are great. Social media is great. It's a place to find people that keep you excited about politics. But I want to ask your listeners to get involved physically out in the brick and mortar world. I am now, and it feels amazing.
Well, yeah, I thought the greatest thing about your story was how you saw somebody you knew through organizing, and she was able to take that video for you. Like, that's exactly the sort of thing that needs to be happening.
That's exactly it.
Jessica
You're doing
Clinton, yes.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
What sound do we have left here? All right, let's do the Hannity sound, and then we will. Okay. Sean Hannity. Of course. I mean, look, I guess this is just the sort of, in the universe we're in, I've made this point. I mean, whether it's Alex Jones or Sam Harris, those types of characters, I think, matter a lot more from a media checking perspective with regards to YouTube and podcasts in some respects than Fox News. But Fox News is still actually with Sinclair, which people are getting hip to too. But it's still massively important in terms of the media landscape. And a couple days ago, Mike Cohen, his offices were raided. We were talking about this. I'm not attempting to read the tea leaves on the Mueller thing. I remain convinced that there's some type of money laundering angle. And I'm sure if you're looking to find a crime involving, payoffs to porn stars, you probably find some stuff there too. These are all, my God, it would be shocking if there wasn't. And so raid, everybody, there was a raid, Cohen's office, and of course, Sean Hannity, second string quarterback at Her Lady of Perpetual Disappointments High School in Long Island, was out on TV and doing his whiny looking. Wow, he's getting puffier by the day. And here is his response to the FBI raid on the Trump's lawyer's office.
Case in point. Just start with Hillary Clinton. Clearly, she is guilty. Incontrovertible evidence of multiple felonies, mishandling of classified information, destruction of such, obstruction of justice. And if you don't believe me, try deleting one day 33,000 subpoenaed emails, acid washing your hard drive with bleach spit, destroying your cell phones with hammers. And was her home raided? Was her lawyer's home raided? Not a chance. We have a two-tier justice system. What about fired FBI Director James Comey? What about Bruce and Nellie Orr? What about anti-Trump lovebirds Strzok and Page? What about lying Susan Rice? What about Christopher Steele, the foreign national that Fusion GPS hired and funneled the money Hillary did through the law firm, and the foreign national got Russian lies to influence the American people in an election? What about who lied to the FISA court judges? Now you can see on the side of your screen, there really aren't any anti-Trump officials or entities who have been subject to any of these aggressive tactics. None.
It's so funny because, like, Glenn Beck was like the pioneering lunatic of Fox News with like the chalkboard and the bizarre conspiracy theories, and he's off. Like, he's become irrelevant in so many ways, even down to like Jordan Peterson does better like histrionics than him. And now like Sean Hannity, who's just totally of the like, George Bush, fucking A, American flag, kill Arabs, fucking dude. Now he has to like get into this weird new Trump, like, it's a deep state. It goes so deep. But he's still just like this sort of like proper, like, I mean, he has the whininess and the aggrievement and the single track obsession with people like Hillary, but it just, he still doesn't have the emotional tenor. Like, if you're going to do lists about that and be that obsessive, you need to have a whiff of the basement about you. And there's many things about Sean Hannity, from his stupidity and his limits as a broadcaster, but there isn't any, like, I'm not buying him as a paranoid lunatic.
All of us feel like we're trapped in a barn fire.
Thank you. That's what I'm talking about. Now, there's a guy whose profound emotional instability really overlapped with his programming.
Why not just cover me in a bucket of blood?
Right. Like Sean Hannity, like, why not cover me in a bucket of the blood of the deep state? Because Hillary's a bitch.
It is like,
all right.
Hannity's like, Hannity probably went up to Ailes like, I can do what Glenn's doing. Like, you can let go of him. I got that.
Yeah, and Ailes like, I don't really buy it. Fuck it. As long as
you can approximate it.
Yeah, you can approximate it. As long as you still do the spick material, it doesn't matter. Now get the fuck out of my office. I got some woman to rape. And that is Fox News. One of the most disgusting things to ever exist in human history. You're calling from a 929 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Christian Rodriguez calling out of Brooklyn.
Hey, what's going on, Chris? What's on your mind?
Not much. Wanted to call and ask you guys a couple things that's been on my mind, but real quickly, going back to the Zuckerberg thing. You know, I think it's very funny that you have somebody like Lindsey Graham, you know, all up in arms when just literally a year ago, you know, you had Republicans try to push for ISPs being able to sell your data off without your consent.
Yeah,
no, just
of course.
a year ago.
Of course. It's like barely even. I mean, that's important policy. So thanks for bringing it up. But I mean, pointing out the hypocrisy of these people is like, it's not only besides the point. It's just like sky is blue stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, my actual question is not really much on policy.
Yep.
But you know, I used to live in a place where everybody, it was basically a military fort, a base, a military base.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the kids that I went to high school with ended up going to the military.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you ask them why, they'll say, oh, you know, I want to get a job, or, you know, they have health care, they have good benefits. I want to get education. And, you know, it kind of made me realize that, you know, had the state provided those things, maybe those people would not have enlisted.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess my question is, how much of that is actually like kind of conscious in the mind of, you know, those people in Congress or, you know, on Washington Hill?
No, I don't totally look like conscious is an interesting word.
I don't really like, traveling like trafficking in conspiracies at all. But
no, I don't. But I think it's an unconscious conspiracy, and I think that there are also they're totally comfortable with that reality, and that reality is the cumulative effect of a lot of, I don't want to use the word conspiracies, but a lot of policy choices that are quite consciously, intentionally designed to squeeze people and make people suffer. I mean, you know, that was the big upshot of this whole Sam Harris debacle and mess is getting people reacquainted with Charles Murray, who was actually one of the most influential policy entrepreneurs in conservative politics in the last several decades. In addition, I mean, that's actually his primary. He's secondarily and is a racist, and should be understood as such. But his primary mission was naturalizing and getting into all of the weird pseudoscience to justify slashing and gutting social spending. And, that obviously, there you go. So, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there's any real fear in anybody's mind that, if we destroy the incentive structure to join, the world's largest standing military voluntarily, that, we might lose, some of that military power that we have?
I'm totally willing to face that problem when we come to it.
No,
thanks for the call, man. You're calling from a 269 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
This is Isha, and I'm calling from New York.
Hey, Isha, what's going on?
Okay, this is not a serious call, but Tammy, I have to say that was awesome how she did the lizard man thing.
Incredibly awesome.
Okay, but this one, okay. Now I'm going to blame you for this 100%.
And goodbye.
I was at this. No, wait, listen. Last week I was at this restaurant. And I was talking about Jeffrey Wright, and apparently he has a gold mine where he didn't pay his staff properly. So while I was talking with my friend, I said, "Can you believe Jeffrey doesn't pay his black African workers?" And then these ladies, and then these ladies looked at me really weirdly. So that was embarrassing.
Wait, Jeffrey Wright, the actor, owns a gold mine? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yes, he owns a gold mine in Sierra Leone.
Oh my God. That is I would think if I was a woke hipster actor type, I would go juice bar. I wouldn't be I think I want to get into one of the most environmentally toxic, labor abusive industries in the planet in a country that was racked by brutal civil wars. It's an interesting play. Interesting play, Jeffrey Wright. Yeah. Sure that's not very woke of me. I did support Bernie, so that's probably just my racial assumption that a man of color cannot engage in the performativity of owning a gold mine. So you're probably right about that.
That is true.
Right.
And then he gave them two coats that were he had to buy coats from their own pocket, and the salary was 2 months late.
Wow, that is fucking mind blowing. And I do apologize about the black African thing. I'm amazed that it hasn't happened to me yet. But I have not done that slip up. Thank you for the call. Evening. Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
He's in a lot of good movies.
He's an incredibly good actor.
I don't really follow film.
He's a great actor. I know he tweets.
And he's that guy.
He's not he tweets some sort of dumbish, he is a little bit on that kind of pseudo woke resistance end, but he's far from the worst offender. So I was 100% give Jeffrey Wright a pass until I found out that he owned a fucking gold.
Jesus.
I was like, wow, that escalated quickly.
If you're extracting resources from Africa, yeah.
I like that. We went from yeah, whatever. He's a great actor. I mean, I guess he's got some kind of boring standard issue politics. Whatever. Who cares? To oh yeah, he owns a gold mine.
I don't know why I'm surprised by this because I don't actually know anything about him as a person. I just know he tends to play smart, likable characters.
But I think it's surprising
that do a thing like that.
I mean, maybe there's something I don't know about this guy, but I think it's kind of that's not just if you said, "Hey, did you know that Jeffrey Wright owns a restaurant in Brooklyn or something?" That would be expected. It's kind of surprising that he owns a gold mine. It wouldn't be what you'd put money on. It's interesting.
Yeah, maybe he's one of those folks who wants to invest in gold.
All right, when we get to 10,000 patrons on TMBS, I'll open a gold mine. Could you imagine? That would actually be really funny. It's just me. Everything is the same, except it's just no, but I own a gold mine in Sierra Leone.
I've got a thorium reactor in the Congo.
You're calling from a 919 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael. This is Ahmed from DC. How are you?
Hey, what's going on, Ahmed? I'm doing well.
I'm good. Just wanted to call in and quickly shame MSNBC and I guess like a few other network news channels for this storyline about Paul Ryan. Them hawking this I just want to be a better dad. This is why I'm not seeking re-elections. Just because I don't want to be a weekend dad nonsense.
Right. Right.
It's pretty obvious. Why a career politician like Paul Ryan, someone who is as ambitious as he is, right? They even tried to run with this this idea that Paul Ryan. We used to make fun of him for his the whole thing with him and his workout regimen and the photos of him with the shirt off and all that.
Right.
And they tried to say it was because of his father and his dad passed away at an early age, and this is why he did it. It's Paul Ryan is just an ambitious politician, and we know where he's going to end up after he is no longer Speaker of the House. He's going to get some kind of cushy job, probably in Washington.
Yeah,
right?
he probably will lobby. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. I would be shocked if he didn't do something like lobbying. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like this thing where the media has like fully, refused to question or not even question, but just mention the obvious.
Well, let me just say,
going along with whatever.
I agree with you completely, and this is actually, in a different discourse, there's this obsession with, in debates, we need to assume people's good intentions and blah blah blah, and that might be true for a certain type of intellectual engagement. Maybe we should look at that, but at this point, I mean, to cover someone like Paul Ryan, it's just utter journalistic malpractice and credulousness. It's just embarrassing. Thanks for the call. All right. Let me read a few IMs, do two more calls, and then we're out of here. NYC Mantle, if you owned a gold mine, you could send Sam Harris and others to work in it for you. Also, this gold mine idea is getting very attractive.
I just looked it up. He founded it as like a conflict-free, some kind of, nicer gold
No,
mine
I'm sure
company.
that there's a nicer gold. I mean, look, that's a pretty fucking ambitious, like, even if you take that let's say he has great intentions, like that is like, it's one thing to say like, I'm going to find a coffee grove that's a worker cooperative and compensate them well for their coffee. That's doable. I think going into one of the most complex industries and one of the most granted, Sierra Leone hasn't been in conflict since at least I think 2099 or the early, but still, I mean, it's very ambitious, Jeffrey, right?
It's like starting a aviation company to try to stop the war machine or something.
Right, exactly. We're going to just start a socially responsible arms contractor. I want a socially responsible alternative to Lockheed. Ryan Chat, has anyone ever considered that many Republicans aren't seeking re-election for two reasons? Very rarely does the party in power hold their majority after a presidential election. That's why not only you see Congress and not the Senate not seeking re-elections. Most importantly, the damage the tax bill will do. They will give up in the midterms for 2020. The reason being, once people see the effects, they will get the blame, and I think Democrats will take the House back in 2018. I don't think in 2020. Solidarity. Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman stated that the unarmed and clearly identified journalist Yassar Merjatai, slain by the IDF, was a terrorist and had the rank of quote-unquote captain in Hamas. He provided no evidence to support these claims because there is no evidence. And people like Avigdor Lieberman lie all the time. Let's see. Neo Pergros. When did you talk about Corbyn and anti-Semitism accusations on TMBS? Was it part of the members only segment?
Tail end
of the public. Sorry, Joseph Ballin, I'm not doing it today. Mitch from Houston. A black woman in Texas was sentenced to 7 years in jail for voting in the 2016 election on parole. That is astonishing. I mean, even by the standards of this farcical racist country.
Yeah, you get your voting rights stripped, and then you get thrown away for not knowing your voting rights got stripped.
That is... Jesus Christ. I don't even know.
Fucking outrageous.
I don't even know how to process that. But you know what? I actually, hearkening back, I will say to the Harris conversation, Sam's thought experiments about Jew marathon running, far more relevant for unpacking the current situation today than that story. Obviously. What is the basis of the origin of animosity between Iran and Saudi Arabia? Well, the Sunni-Shia divide is relevant and has, historical basis to some extent. The Shah was very pro-Western and closely aligned with the United States, like the Saudis. But then in '79, in the Iranian Revolution, they tried to track a not East or West foreign policy, so that translated to both not being aligned with the United States. Then they both supported different types of proxy groups. The Shia groups, and I'm not a supporter, but Shia political Islam also has serious kind of anti-imperialist, anti-colonial overtones, which the Shia and Sunni Salafist groups that Saudi supported absolutely do not. And then most importantly, they're just in a regional conflict for power and influence. Sean, one of the first executive orders that Donald Trump signed gave internet companies the ability to buy and sell your personal information without your permission, so this whole hearing thing is pointless. Indeed. And no one brought that up, as far as I know. How should we frame the Zuckerberg testimony in the Senate in the context of just passing the 1-year anniversary of Republicans passing a law allowing ISPs to sell our search histories? Well, I mean, in terms of everything that we've been pointing out, there's real policy solutions, and the incompetence and hypocrisy is awe-inspiring. Train Boy, if we do nationalize Facebook, what will this mean for international users of their service? It could still use it. Would have no effect. Dragon Slayer. What I really don't understand about Zuckerberg interview is why he didn't show up in full Wyatt Coke regalia. Good for boardrooms, yachts, discoteca, and congressional hearings. Willow Waz, do you think a Warren Tulsi would be a better candidate in 2020 because neolibs can't slander her with faux sexism charges? Well, neolibs hate Tulsi Gabbard. Occasionally for some, I do not agree with some of her votes on refugees at all. And there's a distinction between opposing intervention in Syria and pointing out backing for Salafist groups, which is important, with running interference for Assad, which she has at times. So there's actually real problems with Tulsi Gabbard. And I'm not going to, she's not the worst, but I'm also not going to lie to a contingent of people about her. There's problems with her. And look, deduct from Bernie Sanders. It was all lies and bullshit and disingenuous then. They'll find something else that's a lie and bullshit and disingenuous in 2020.
They're going to do it no matter what. So that should not be a deciding factor. I mean, they tried to do it to Keith Ellison, for Christ's sake, and he's a black Muslim. Well,
and of course, they actually did it by being sort of hysterically, conspiratorially anti-Muslim. Right. Yeah,
it's like, Bernie, he's a white man, but then you got Keith Ellison and he's anti-Semitic. It doesn't make any sense.
I loved that they actually did literally, like, you literally had the same, like, Clinton morons who would post like Hillary could do anything and they'd post like some like Yaz Queen, like fucking nonsense gif about her, and then the next second, like, there's a debate, and Bernie's like, "Can I finish my point?" And they go, "Oh, he silenced and abused her. This delicate flower." It's like, you guys are going to need to pick here between Yaz Queen ruthlessness and can't deal with an old Jewish man debating her. You fucking morons. You disingenuous fucking idiots. Gabe from Chicago. Kamala Harris asked the actual important question of Zuck. Why didn't you tell us earlier about Cambridge? Yes, fair point. Every other question was nonsense posturing, and why are we asking the bourgeoisie if they want to be regulated? We should give a shit about what they want. Exactly. Your Rachel Maddow sends a lot like your Tucker Carlson voice. Well, at a certain point, this is still my voice. But I do no, Rachel. I'm Rachel Maddow. Russia, and Russia. Tucker Carlson's like, I can't say good morning anymore.
Yeah,
that's sexist.
Your Maddow is, I don't know if it's called down talk, but whereas the Carlson
that's
does
the
upspeak.
Plaintive, whiny pitch of the aggrieved fascist.
You can do a Tucker Carlson impression without even saying words.
That's racist. And all of a sudden, American lives aren't supposed to change that quickly. You used to be able to go to the office coffee machine and finger your secretary. I'm not saying it's right, but the pace of not being able to do it is fast, which liberals
Get those
don't.
white guys. Get them. Get them.
Which liberals don't understand. Sam's Tinder profile, and he requests that I read this in the Sam voice. Hey, girl, swipe right. I'm in Vegas. Let's meet up, and you could read me Social Security reports. I like the name. But you're drawn from the well a little bit, buddy.
You can't keep going back to the same resource.
Yeah, you're gonna need to innovate a little bit. Show sassy Trump. Can we play them a sassy Trump, and then I'll take one more call, and we're gonna be out of here.
I enjoy the hell out of that.
Yeah, I played it on the post game last night, but let's enjoy give it to people in the fun half as well.
There's a new one?
Yeah, there is a new one. I mean, let's just do the new one. Why not? Rights companies meant to encourage ethical and sustainable extraction of resources and conflict. I don't think it's meant to be exploitative. My guess, there's a lot of naivete involved, and he did it for good reasons. That makes total sense to me. As I say, it's an extraordinarily ambitious area to go and try to do an ethical version of. Literally. Do you have that?
Let's do one we haven't watched yet.
All right, let's do one we haven't watched yet. I love it. We have a sassy Trump. Dostoevsky in the Sheets. To the caller who was talking about unions, I recommend reading early Sorel on syndicalism. Okay, go ahead. Sassy Trump at the Value Voters Summit.
We see this spirit in the men and women who selflessly enlist appropriate and proportionate to measure and other measures jobs. They sacrifice every day for the furniture and future of their children, and to ensure that Iran never, never.
Okay, actually, can you do me a favor? And I hate to do this, but can we just watch the McCain one? I hate to make Trump look in a good light, but this was his greatest moment.
A war hero, 5.5 years as a POW, you call him a dummy. Is that appropriate in running for
okay, you gotta let me speak though, Frank, because you interrupt all the time, okay? Huh? So... No, I know him too well. It's the problem. Let's take John McCain. I'm in Phoenix. Yeah. We have a meeting that's going to have 500 people at the Biltmore Hotel. We get a call in the hotel. It's turmoil. Thousands and thousands of people are showing up. 3-4 days before, they're pitching tents on the hotel grass. The hotel says we can't handle this. Going to destroy the hotel. We move into the convention center. We have 15,000 people. Joe, the biggest one ever. Bigger than Bernie Sanders. Bigger than 15,000 people showed up to hear me speak. Bigger than anybody. And everybody knows it. A beautiful day with incredible people that were wonderful, great Americans, I will tell you. John McCain goes, oh boy, Trump makes my life difficult. He had 15,000 crazies show up. Crazies, he called them all crazy. I said they weren't crazy, they were great Americans. These people, if you were to see those people, I know what crazy is. I know all about crazy.
Oh, yes, you do.
These weren't crazy. So he insulted me, and he insulted everybody in that room. And I said, somebody should run against John McCain, who has been, in my opinion, not so hot. But I supported him. I supported him for president. I raised $1 million for him. That's a lot of money. I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, he lost. So I never liked him as much as that because I don't like losers.
John McCain,
but Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero. He is a war hero. He was a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured. Okay. I hate to tell you. He was a war hero. He was a war hero because he was captured. Okay. And I believe perhaps he's a war hero, but right now he said some very bad things about a lot of people. So what I said is, John McCain, I disagree with him that these people aren't crazy. And And very importantly, and I speak the truth, he graduated last in his class. So I said, nobody knows that. I said he graduated last, or second to last, graduated last in his class in Annapolis. And he was upset, and I said, why, for telling the truth?
Trump is such a messy bitch. Oh my God. Dude, that was one of those really inadvertently. It was great though. Like the way he did that, and then all of the usual like pencil necks were just like, I can't hold out, it's over because John McCain is a very respected war hero, and everybody was just like, we don't care. That was great. All right, final call of the day. You're calling from a 518 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, what's up? This is Jordan from Ohio.
Hey, Jordan, what's going
on? Nothing. I wanted to talk about a little bit how the South is actually changing for the better.
Okay.
I lived in New York, and then I moved to Albany, Georgia, which is like the buckle on the Bible Belt.
Right.
And I went to a Christian school there. Okay. I arrived there around the time Obama got elected.
Mm-hmm.
And we would talk about it in class, and they were really concerned that he was the Antichrist. And this was the topic of discussion almost every day in class.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we've grown up and we're no longer there, a lot of my classmates are now liberals.
Oh, that's interesting.
Maybe
Why
not
do you
as
think
left-wing
so?
as I am, but like I think when you grow up in that kind of repressive environment, you sort of rebel against it.
Mm-hmm.
So like you're sort of inculcated with it 24/7, and then once you actually get access to information, you don't want to deal with it anymore.
Word.
So one of my classmates is at a top 50 law school working on immigration law, trying to help refugees.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, like I'm in grad school, and I have a few other classmates that are in law school doing the same thing.
Right.
This may be sort of anecdotal, but like I don't think we can be down on all the people. No, I don't think all the people we can be down on them, because a lot of the younger kids don't have the same beliefs as the deportable parents do.
I agree 100%.
So I think we should remember that there are people that we can reach out to in the South, and that they're not all bad.
Of course, absolutely. And I look at things more through class, less through region. Thanks a million for the call, man. All right, guys, a few more IMs, then we are out of here. Kindergarten cop. Why doesn't the government just buy companies that will obviously crucially become a part of life? Like, why not buy a driverless car startup now because it's likely to the future of public transport? Why doesn't government own a grocery store chain? For every necessary service, there should be a public option. Well, I mean, the why is obvious, right? But it's a potentially really good idea.
There's other like kind of downsides to something like that. Like there's an idea of like, let's say you nationalize fossil fuel companies. Like if you do that and you compensate like the people who own them now, then you're basically just making the losses public for fossil fuels. Right. So you have to be careful with all things like that. But I generally agree with the sentiment.
And some industries just deserve to be expropriated without compensation. Like the healthcare. I mean, I think all of them, but, pragmatically speaking, the healthcare industry does not deserve to live.
I mean, of course. I mean, it's not even, yes, morally, but it's also just like an insane, the whole incentive structure, even by capitalist logic, is totally insane with regards to healthcare. Ivanka is her own kind of monster, robot cat, indeed. Tomcat, hi, Michael. I imagine you may have seen this already, but did you see this story back in 2012 about that Australian exam organizations that included a doctored image of a giant robot helping socialist revolutionaries in 1917 in a history exam? I totally did not see. That's amazing. Wow.
I want to see.
I think we need to build, fund and build robots like these to get people on board. Let's see. All right.
Technology is only as good as the hands that it's in.
Indeed. Let's see. The final IM of the day. Got it? You got something? Thernavith Slayer. No carpenter is going to want Zuckerberg on their job site. There is absolutely 100% the case. I actually think pretty much no anyone is going to want Mark Zuckerberg on their job site. Tomorrow, Sam is in Vegas. He's going to be like, so it's unbelievable because they knew about the asbestos in the documents. It's unbelievable. This harkens back to the other case that I talked about 50,000 times last year. Is that true? And then there's some lawyer from like Florida who's like, that is true. You're a remarkable. How the hell do you know all of this? I did some law school. You see?
The best thing about Vegas is like he often talks to people with the types of voices you don't usually hear, like bashing corporations.
That's
like,
true.
Like
well, I'll tell you what. Then we found that this same goddamn insurance company was... But it's the nature of capitalism. Endlessly exploit, folks.
It's just profit seekers, man.
Yeah, it's just profit seekers and rentiers, dude. That's what it fucking is, man.
Well, we hear Jeff from Georgia talk like that all the time.
That's true.
That is true.
Kenny Powers.
Kenny Powers talks like that all the time. You got season fucking means of production, dude. Most of the lawyers in my head, I picture looking like Will Ferrell's car salesman on the Kenny Powers show. Or Ric Flair. No, but actually, I think those Vegas shows are actually really great, really informative. Part of all of the ingredients that make Majority is so much more, substantive. In fact,
the Vegas show in fall is when I started in 2015. So they have a special kind of resonance for me.
Indeed. And then also there'll always be some funny like tech mishap where he'll hear us in the background being like, hey, I don't know if porn can be ethical, man. Nah, fuck that. Then he's just like, are you guys even listening? I've been talking about airbag recalls for 45 minutes. You're not even listening. God damn it. So there'll be some of that as well. That's always pretty fun. All right, everybody. We're here tomorrow. Thanks.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah.